Good morning, everybody. Hope you all are doing well today. I do want to mention that your chapters are up on As You Learn, so if you want to check those out, those will be very beneficial for your papers as well as some of your homework that will be due in the not too distant future, as well as some discussion boards that I will be planning on posting up here in the not too distant future. So, as always, keep an eye out for those. Keep an eye out for your homework. It's just a good idea to kind of keep looking on As You Learn to make sure that you are seeing everything that needs to be seen for the success for this class. So, which includes the reading that I know a lot of y'all had questions about concerning the influences and weapons of persuasion. And so I want to talk about that today, mentioning Dr. Robert Cialdini, who mentioned the 6 universal principles of persuasion. This was a really, really cool read because if you start reading through his material, especially through some of his kind of personal testimony, I think I've mentioned this briefly, that he was just a college professor realizing that he was being persuaded by a lot of different methods and he wanted to know why. So he took up a bunch of odd jobs to kind of learn these tricks of the trade to say, hey, I'm going to be a car salesperson. What does that entail? What are the tricks that a car salesperson might use in this case? And so, it was these really interesting concepts of being able to say, why am I being persuaded? Is it something that I'm being persuaded because I actually want something and this is a message kind of bolstering that want or desire? Or is it the actual persuasion attempt of saying, I didn't want it, but now I kind of do? Which is, again, a very interesting premise to be able to kind of talk about. And so we talk about these 6 universal principles of persuasion. It's on your As You Learn. And again, these will help on terms of writing your paper. So I would definitely make sure to check these out here. So, to start off, first and foremost, I won't show the YouTube clip here, but there are these kind of infomercials that talk about creating need or creating want for something. It's one of my favorite scenes in Mad Men where they said, the whole basis of advertising is that everything is okay. You are okay doing whatever it is that you're doing. And so that's the kind of premise to state to somebody that either something's going wrong and this will solve that problem, or you will have something to where you have it and you want to keep doing that because obviously it's going really well. So these are the kind of basic tenets within it. I'm going to omit some things within persuasion, as I mentioned in the previous posted lecture. And the main reason for that is because I still want y'all to define persuasion to the best of your abilities and see how that differs from coercion. So let's talk about some of these 6 right here. And so this won't be a terribly long lecture, but I want to talk about these 6 right here. So within the weapons of influence, first one we talk about is called reciprocity, the notion that someone is doing you a favor. And this is a very interesting one that you might kind of take a reservation towards. And what I mean by that is you might see a persuasion attempt in your life where somebody is telling you, hey, can I do something for you? And if you've ever known a person that you might have to kind of sit there and back off and go, well, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not going to accept because I feel like there's going to be an area where I have to pay you back at some point. It's kind of that they scratch your back, now you have to scratch theirs. And so that can be really uncomfortable, particularly when it comes to money. So a lot of people don't like getting loans because they know that they have to pay it back. It's not something free. Even if they don't have to pay it back, even if it's a gift, there's always this area of feeling indebted to somebody. And this is where areas within group organization, or excuse me, group communication comes in for things like power, is that a person that has given money and now another person is indebted to them, they might feel like they have some power, or the person who owes money might feel powerless. And so this is the kind of thing that within reciprocity, it's a very foundational thing within relationships. But where it comes into being very difficult for people is this feeling like they owe it, feeling like they have to pay back. This is actually shown starting in areas like Twitch, for instance, where a viewer will be viewing a stream, for instance. So let's say you're a streamer, you're playing a game, somebody likes your content, and they send you a subscribe. So $5.99 a month, and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, somebody likes my channel, and they want to contribute. But let's say that same person who gave you that subscription starts acting really rude to the rest of your followers, starts saying things within the chat that are inappropriate or invasive, and you say, well, you have to stop this. And this happens quite a bit, where somebody will ban an audience member and them get upset because now they're sitting here going, well, that's not fair. I donate all this money. I spend all this time. Why am I getting banned for something that I've done in a chat room? And so that's kind of that area of reciprocity, where the viewer feels like they're owed something. And the streamer's like, no, it does not work that way. And so a lot of this can feel in terms of this weighted balance that we might not feel comfortable with something when it comes to this persuasion. And honestly, when it comes down to it, I've had a long conversation with how do you kind of combat against reciprocity? How do you make it so that you don't get caught in this loop of feeling like you owe something to someone? And honestly, some of it will have to be kind of putting your foot down and possibly even being rude to say, I'm not accepting that. And that's really hard sometimes, because a lot of people might get upset at you saying, no, I'm doing this as a favor. And ultimately, shutting that down is one of the only ways of making sure that that power struggle doesn't go into a debt or debtor in this case. So that's the basis of reciprocity. It's a very interesting one to go through. Then it's social proof, the concept that everybody's doing it. And this is the kind of idea of saying something is popular, therefore you will probably buy something or be influenced by something. This is a couple strategies here. One is you'll start to see things like a rating system. So if you see like 5 stars on an Amazon product, you might think twice if that 5-star is only one person that's rated it versus a collection of people who have rated it. So if it's one person versus 100 person saying, you know, I give this 5 stars, this product was good, the shipping was good, then you might go, well, actually, that sounds like an actual pretty good product. And so we like when something is approved by a lot of different people. This is the concept within Rotten Tomatoes, for instance. And you might have experienced this, where you have judged a movie based on the ideology that it's well liked amongst a bunch of critics. Now, I've got my own problems with Rotten Tomatoes in terms of you might have it's a yes or no system, so it's either good or bad, which I don't like. I would much rather have it on a scale of some sort than something that's nominal here. But the idea here is that everybody's doing it. And the important thing to realize when you are going through a persuasive tactic here, within everyone is doing it, you have to think to yourself, am I being persuaded because I genuinely like something, or I'm doing it because everyone's doing it? Are my tastes defined based on everybody else's ideas behind it? So this is the kind of thing in terms of, quote, being basic. if you will. There's a really good sketch that I'll look to post on. It was my college humor, and they had a good idea for it. Was saying, "Oh, I'm going to be posting a Live, Laugh, Love poster on my wall. I'm going to do all these vanilla scented candles around." And, somebody criticizes this poor young woman of saying, "Oh, you're really basic." And because the whole basic concept is that everyone's doing it. But what if you just like those things? What if that's just genuinely good advice to live, laugh, love? What if it's vanilla scented candles or something to use because they just smell good, and you genuinely like that? And so that's the kind of thing to kind of combat against. There is also kind of the area of reverse where our tastes are defined because everyone's doing it. And what I mean by that is the opposite way, because I'll sit there and go, I don't like something because everybody's doing it. That's also equally as ludicrous as doing something just because everybody likes it. You should do something because you like it, not because everyone's doing it or everyone's not doing it, to kind of go up against the grain. Because if you are doing it against the grain, that ultimately means that your tastes are defined by what everybody else is doing. So, social proofs are very much a concept that we're either aware of, not aware of, but we still follow by it. So that's another very important one. Scarcity. I always look at the McRib for this one. I always think it has got to be one of the most unusual products. And it kind of goes to this area of the McRib would not be a very popular sandwich if it wasn't scarce. I doubt if this was something that was available all the time that people would continuously go and buy this sandwich when it's available. If it's always available, it's no longer special. But if it's a limited time only, then you might think twice and you might go, oh, wow, that's actually a really good deal, regardless if it's a good deal or not. Regardless if a McRib is a good sandwich or not. I know this for the stream sale right now for Steam on PC, that they will have a summer sale. And again, a lot of them are actually extremely good deals. But we do find ourselves in many cases buying something because it might not be available tomorrow. This is actually a common tactic used by car salespersons, that what they'll do is they'll say, and I actually experienced this with my wife. We went to a dealership looking to buy a car, and they go, well, this car might not be on the lot tomorrow if you don't sign. And I kind of had to like squint my eyes and kind of wag my finger a little bit internally. I didn't actually do it to this car salesperson, but I sat there and was like, I know what you're doing. You're trying to make this more scarce than it might actually be. To say, oh, if I don't wake up at 6 a.m., that car might be gone, when in reality, car's probably still going to be there. Probably not going to be swiped up immediately. But we're actually seeing this right now in terms of the housing market. I know in Boone, for instance, we're going through that problem where it's like sight unseen, paid in cash. It's just hard to find real estate here, not only for people that are trying to buy homes, but student housing as well. And so you just take what you can get. And so that's where that scarcity kind of comes into play here. I love this one. Authority. If a doctor says it, then I believe it. This is a difficult one to kind of navigate, because we often look at people that have some sort of authority, whether it be age, whether it be qualification, that we would sit there and go, well, I trust this person because, 9 out of 10 dentists say that this is a good product for me. And if 9 out of 10 dentists who are well qualified say that this is a good product, then that's what I'm going to do. And we've seen where this can go awry, as Cigarettes, for instance, have been promoted by doctors in the past. It's the same thing with the Dr. Oz effect. There was a good segment by John Oliver talking about the Dr. Oz effect. Because he is likable, because he is credible by many people, I do not consider him credible in this sense, because he is an attractive person, there are all these elements that line together to where he becomes an authoritative figure to what he's trying to promote, which makes it all the more baffling when you're dealing with something like court cases, which I'm like, look, Dr. Oz, you might have a genuine degree in health and medicine or something, but that does not mean you have a JD. That does not mean that you can practice law. Did you pass the bar? And so with all these, we might sit there and go, the expertise is very difficult to define. And who do we trust in that case? And that's ultimately why we've kind of turned to influencers on social media, because it's the time dedicated towards something. I know, for instance, I watch a lot of English Premier League. I'm a big West Ham fan. It's on my About Me. And I've got a couple people that I follow on Twitter that give the best information about things like trade acquisitions, free agency, that kind of thing. And I would sit there and go, yeah, I know their sources are good. I know that they have authority. I know that they have a good connection with the organization itself, that they can make bold statements that actually come to fruition. And that's a very difficult thing to be able to claim that. It's the same thing of why, a professor is hired by a university, is they'll sit there and say they have authority because they are an expert within this topic. So the fact that I've taken multiple classes within persuasion on a doctoral level, the fact that I work in advertising and so forth, kind of makes it to where I know I can talk about this and talk about these areas within what works in persuasion and what have difficulties. And ultimately, authority is another thing that's really hard to combat against, because a person might sit there and go, well, I am the person that researches this. And I've always liked doctors or PhDs in the field that were always willing to be open to understanding science for what it is, and that Carl Sagan used to say science thrives on failure. And ultimately, science is always evolving. So with something like this, your theory might not be something that is always going to be relevant throughout the history of time. It might be something where somebody does another study, and it just so happens that has more truth than what you're doing. So I always like the magnanimity of certain professors that would sit there and say, I would challenge a theory, and they would be like, you know what? It'd be really interesting if you ran that study and see what you found, to see if it combats against what I, previously determined. It might be that we're kind of doing into a different evolution of communication as we know it. And that's the kind of thing that we have to think about. But this is difficult because there will be people that associate this authority with power, and to be able to combat against that is very difficult, because people will use things like degrees to say, well, I have a master's or a PhD, therefore you can't argue against me, which I never liked. There always is room for argument. However, that happens quite a bit. Okay. This is a great example. And if you haven't looked at this is going to be, oops, went too far. Slow down. There we go. The whole Milgram experiment, you've probably heard of this at one time or another. The whole idea within the Milgram experiments was to kind of talk about the idea that people in World War II were influenced by the Nazis, especially in Germany, and there's always been the kind of common axiom that people would say something to the effect of, "Oh, I would never do that. I would see it coming a mile away. I would never fall under an authoritarian regime and turn a blind eye to all this horrific stuff that's going on." And Stanley Milgram was like, "Well, let's see about that." And so if you've heard of this experiment, it's pretty simple. They took two people. One was a Confederate, and a Confederate is a person who is in on the experiment itself. They're in another room. The participant that is in the experiment will walk in, and the person who's moderating or is coming up with the experiment will say, "All right, I'm going to ask a question, and the person on the other side is going to answer this question. If they get it right, then great, nothing happens. If they get it wrong, you give them a little shock." And so they've got like buttons from 1 to 30. So every time that a person answers a question and they get it wrong, they increase the voltage. And now they can't see this person, but they can hear them. So ultimately what happens is that, somebody will say, "Oh, I got it wrong," and they press the 1 button as like the lowest voltage, and somebody go, just like a small little, you ever been like a mild shock, like teeny tiny, where it's like, "Oh, I felt that." Whereas then what happened is, as they kept getting wrong answers, the voltage would apparently increase. Now, I will mention that the Confederate in this case is fine. Nothing's actually happening to them. But it is the illusion that something horrific is about to happen. So, at like voltage number 5, someone would go, "Ow!" Whereas at voltage number 10, they would go, "Oh my gosh, that really hurt." Versus, voltage number 20, they are screaming for dear life. And the reason for this experiment was not to kind of talk about like sadism or masochism or anything. It was to kind of determine if the person that's running this experiment just says, "Okay, next one," would the person keep going, knowing that this was going on? And the most interesting one was like at 20, it would be screaming bloody murder. And like by 25, it would be dead silent, to kind of assume that this person might be dead on the other side. And again, the experimenter never said, "Would you like to keep going?" Because at a certain point, you would just be like, "Of course I don't want to keep going. This is really messed up." Versus, you might have a situation where a person would say, "No, I'm just not comfortable, so I'm just going to leave." So the idea behind it was, I'm just going to say, "Let's keep going. Next one," and see what happens. So I labored on that one a little bit too long here. Interesting experiment, and it was conducted a long time ago, but they've done updated versions of it to where people have done it. There's actually videos that you can find right now of it. Consistency. Staying true to your commitments. I don't know if you've ever heard of what's called sunk cost fallacy, which means if you're invested in something, you will stay with it until the end. Kind of like if you were to watch this video all the way through, it might be really bad, but you're kind of sticking with it. I'm already here at this point. You might have done this with a workout or something where, "Oh gosh, I am suffering. I am not feeling this workout. It's terrible. But I'm already kind of 3/4 of the way through it, so I might as well see it through." We might see this, though, in branding, as far as brand loyalty, for instance. That I'm not willing to try something new because I've already committed to this. Like, you might have something that you use on the regular, like a laundry detergent, for instance. That may be a bad example. I mean, for me personally, I use Burt's Bees for lip balm. I'm kind of obsessed with it to where I stick with this consistency. I always purchase it. It's the only brand I ever use, and so I am very much brand loyal. Are there better brands out there that would give a level of the same relief that I would feel if I didn't use Burpees? Maybe, yeah. I think it's very possible, but I'm not willing to try it out. And again, that might be somewhat of a logical fallacy. It's the same concept where you'd see on like newspapers and articles that would sit there and go, well, millennials and Gen Zs are ruining these products, are ruining these businesses like Applebee's or Ruby Tuesdays or something. And half of it's where and they would say, well, millennials and Gen Zers are not brand loyal, which is just not true. You can find things that millennials and Gen Z are very much brand loyal on. It's just that maybe a chain restaurant that's kind of advertising themselves as this family restaurant is not the place that they want to go. And they may be serving really subpar food, where if I go to a local place like Vidalia, I would sit there and go, and this is amazing. So I don't want to go to a Ruby Tuesdays or a Chili's or something like that. So it's not that you're ruining it. And again, this is kind of an interesting thing about persuasion, is this ideology that people say, well, you're ruining this. This is consistency. We've always had it this way. And you're breaking that trend. I can't tell you how many times we see this of, we can't stop doing this because it's always been that way. It's always been the commitment. And you might have to sit there and think sometimes, why do we do it this way? Why has this always been the way that it is? Again, something like a diamond ring, for instance, for an engagement, we've done it because it's a advertising campaign that has been long before you or I were born. Does it make it right? No. Again, this is a cultural thing that is based on based on a advertising scheme. I mean, it's the same thing with like purchasing pumpkin spice during the fall. You don't have to. In fact, it's something that is, again, an elaborate marketing scheme that has ultimately taken a hold of our culture. And that happens so much. But we see this happening quite a lot. And we have to think about why we're doing this. Are we doing this because it is something that, again, everybody's doing, that it's consistent? Or is it that I actually genuinely like pumpkin spice lattes? It's a pumpkin flavored milkshake that you could drink in the middle of the day. I'm quoting this off the video. But yeah, it's delicious. So you might like it just because you like it. All right, last one. Liking the spokesperson is attractive or admire, or you just like to be liked. We might sit there and watch a video of some sort, and we say that person is very attractive, therefore I am going to stick around and either listen or buy what they have to do. There's actually a whole market on this, and it's super interesting in my opinion, where it goes within the ASMR market. So on Twitch there is a whole video series of ASMR where usually a young woman will be doing will have a certain microphone and making certain noises that kind of go on ASMR. And if there's a subscription that is given, the whisper, thank you for the donation, etc., etc. The market behind this is all based on liking. It is one of the most fascinating things I've ever seen in terms of persuasion. So what will happen? Okay. This young woman who she well knows that people like her. Whether it just kind of be a physical attractiveness or probably physical attractiveness in this case. And the reason I bring that up is because she will say, all right, I want 15 subs by the end of 30 minutes. And if those 15, so again, the subscription is paying $5.99 a month. And It can be done by individual people, or excuse me, it can be done by a collection of people, or it can be done by one person. And so she goes, by the end of 30 minutes, if I don't reach that, I'm stopping the stream. That's what's going to happen. And so she'll do kind of her ASMR thing, and some people genuinely like it for the noises. But some people say, I find this young woman attractive, and therefore I just want to keep watching. So she'll continue the motion of, doing whatever noise she's doing at the time. And here comes the clock, and people are sitting there going, oh, well, the stream is going to end. And honestly, at 30 minutes, if that has not happened and the people have not subbed, she will end the stream right then and there. But ultimately, what ends up happening, and again, this is super interesting within Persuasion, what will end up happening is that one person will take all those 15 to 25 subs or whatever it is, and they'll gift them out to people in the audience. At the last possible second, boom, stream keeps going. Because of this attractiveness, because of this admiration. And it's, again, very interesting of how this area of persuasion works. So we might sit there and go, is this a credible person, or do we just find them attractive? There are multiple studies that kind of allude to the fact that if a person finds someone more attractive, they are somewhat automatically deemed, at least from the start, more trustworthy. Now again, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. However, if you find someone attractive, you may be more likely to trust them versus someone you deem unattractive in this case. So, liking comes into play here. So, anyway, I labored on the point a little bit too much that I wanted to today, but all the same, thank you for your time. This is the 6 weapons of influence. I encourage you to do the readings, and we'll talk about that not only within our reflection paper, but also within the discussion board upcoming. So thank y'all, and we'll see y'all very soon.